Revenge never starts with noise, it begins with silence, and that silence came the day Caitlin Clark waited for a call that never came. She was just a kid in Iowa, a small town girl who believed the biggest stage in the world was wearing that blue and white Yukon jersey. She spent her childhood watching legends like Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, and Brianna Stewart lift trophies under bright lights. She imagined herself there shooting game winners in front of sold-out arenas. That was the dream, the place where stars were made, the mountain every young girl wanted to climb, and Caitlin thought the path to that mountain would be simple: play hard, break records, get noticed, get the call. But the call never came. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the phone stayed silent. Geno Auriemma, the man who shaped decades of women's basketball, never called, never texted, never showed up in a high school gym to see her play, not even a whisper through her AU coach, nothing at all. And it wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. Geno didn't see her as one of his chosen ones. His excuse came later. UConn already had Paige Buchers, and he didn't want 2 point guards. That was the story he told, but underneath it was something colder, something sharp. It wasn't about roster balance, it was about respect, or the lack of it. And then came the insult. He said if Caitlin really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Imagine that, the man who built his legacy on spotting rare talent before anyone else saying she should have chased him. That wasn't just rejection, it was disrespect, and Caitlin felt it burn through her like fire. She could have broken under it, she could have questioned her worth, she could have begged for attention like so many others before her, but she didn't. Instead, she stored it deep like a hidden weapon. If Geno didn't believe in her, she would go where someone did. That place was Iowa. No banners, no dynasty, no aura of invincibility. To the rest of the world, it looked like a fallback plan, a tiny school in the middle of cornfields, but to her it was freedom. She wouldn't be someone's backup plan, she wouldn't be someone's shadow, she would be the face, the future, the foundation. From the moment she stepped on the floor in Iowa City, she changed everything. Her logo threes were not just shots, they were statements. Her passes weren't just assists, they were declarations. Her games weren't just contests, they were proof. She sold out arenas, broke viewership records, turned casual fans into believers. With every move and every point was a message sent straight to the man who had ignored her. You missed this. And while her name exploded, Geno stayed silent. He gave interviews about the future of the sport and never mentioned her. He talked about the next generation of stars and acted like she wasn't one of them. He wanted the world to believe greatness still had to pass through him, through his system, through his throne. But Caitlin was proving she could climb the mountain without his map, and faster than anyone expected. Crowds lined up hours before games, children wore her jersey, cameras followed her every step, highlights flooded every social feed. She had become a phenomenon, and still she said nothing about Geno. She didn't need to. Her game spoke for her, and it spoke louder than words ever could. He had spent decades deciding who mattered in women's basketball and who didn't, but Caitlin Clark was showing the world his approval no longer defined greatness. She was becoming the face of the sport without him, and that truth cut deeper than any insult, because every revenge story begins with a mistake, and Geno's mistake wasn't a bad play or a missed timeout, it was arrogance, the kind that blinds you to what's coming. He thought ignoring her would make her disappear, he thought silence would erase her, but it only fueled her. She wasn't chasing his spotlight, she was building her own, and it was burning brighter than anything he could control. She didn't post rants, she didn't beg for credit, she just played, and the world came to her instead of her going to him. Every record she shattered, every sold-out arena, every kid screaming her name was another crack in the walls of his empire, and she was doing it without ever speaking his name. This was the start, the moment the power began to shift. Geno Auriemma thought she needed him to be great, but Caitlin Clark was about to prove she never did. As Caitlin rose higher, Geno began to speak, and when he spoke it was never praise. It was poison. At first it was subtle, sly smiles during interviews, backhanded compliments slipped between sentences, as if her rise was just a passing trend, as if all the sold-out arenas and record ratings were accidents of timing and not the result of her brilliance. He couldn't say her name without attaching someone else to it. If Caitlin was fearless, well, Paige was too. If Caitlin was inspiring fans, well, Paige did that as well. Every compliment had a shadow, every mention carried a disclaimer. He wanted the world to believe her success was not hers alone, that it still somehow belonged to the empire he built. But masks never last forever, and Geno's charm cracked. The more she rose, the more desperate he sounded. He wasn't just competing with her game, he was competing with her gravity, the way she pulled the world toward women's basketball and away from him. And desperation makes even legends reckless. Soon the whispers became jabs, the jabs became insults, and the insults turned into open fire. By June of 2024, the tension finally broke on national radio on the Dan Patrick Show. The Hall of Fame coach who once ruled the sport stopped pretending he didn't see her. He called her fans delusional. He called them clueless. He said they were so stupid they were ruining women's basketball. He laughed at the idea she could be MVP as a rookie. He mocked the betting odds that placed her in the top 4. He said anyone who believed that was ignorant and embarrassing. He told the world her fan base was giving the sport a bad name. Imagine that, millions of new fans flooding into a league that had begged for attention for decades, families showing up in jerseys, little girls camping outside arenas hoping for a glimpse of their hero, broadcasters finally putting women's games in prime time for the first time ever, and instead of gratitude, instead of pride, Geno gave them contempt. He looked at the spark that was lighting the sport on fire and called it a problem. It wasn't analysis, it wasn't coaching, it was personal. He wasn't talking about her jump shot or her defense, he was talking about her existence and the people who believed in her, and because he was Geno, people listened, they took his words seriously, and that made the cut even deeper. He wasn't just dismissing Caitlin, he was dismissing the wave of hope and energy she had carried into the game, the very people who had carried the league on their backs. He called them delusional for believing in her, and by doing that he revealed what he really believed. He believed the hype wasn't real, he believed her success wasn't sustainable, he believed that in the end he would be proven right and she would be proven ordinary, but he was wrong, and the proof came fast. Caitlin never fired back online, she never clapped back in interviews, she never argued with the talking heads who repeated Geno's words. She didn't need to, because her answer came in the only language that matters, the game. Night after night she stepped on the court with the whole world watching and delivered logo threes that felt like lightning, no-look passes that made entire defenses freeze, crossovers that broke ankles, and highlight reels that went viral before she even reached the locker room. She didn't respond with words, she responded with numbers, and the numbers were undeniable. She won Rookie of the Year, she made the All-WNBA first team, and when the MVP votes were counted she finished exactly 4th, right where her supposedly delusional fans predicted she would be. The very prediction Geno mocked became reality. It was poetic, it was devastating, it was the kind of reversal that ends reputations, and it did. She didn't just win trophies, she took back the narrative. The fans he ridiculed were right, the girl he dismissed was elite, and the world had watched her prove it with their own eyes, and suddenly the charm that had protected Geno for decades crumbled. People noticed, the pattern analysts noticed, fans noticed, other coaches noticed. They saw through the act, they saw how every compliment came with a dig, how every interview was laced with insecurity. They saw how badly he wanted to stay the center of the story, even as the spotlight was moving away from him. They saw how he was trying to drag Caitlin back into his shadow, and they didn't buy it anymore, because Caitlin wasn't in his shadow, she was standing in a light so bright it erased his, and what made it sting even more was how calm she stayed. She didn't gloat, she didn't dance on his fading throne, she just kept playing and kept winning. Every arena she sold out was another piece of his power slipping away. Every record she broke was another crack in the illusion that he still controlled the game, and the more she shined, the smaller he looked. Behind the interviews, behind the fake laughs, behind the forced comparisons, there was fear. Geno had spent his entire career as the gatekeeper of greatness. He decided who mattered, who got the spotlight, who was forgotten, but Caitlin proved the gates were gone. She walked right past them without asking for permission, and by the end of her rookie season it was undeniable. The ratings were the highest in league history, attendance records were shattered, merchandise sales exploded, millions of new fans who didn't care about the old order only cared about her, and every bit of it happened without him. That was the part he couldn't accept, because it meant something bigger than wins and losses. It meant the sport no longer needed him, it meant the center of gravity had shifted. For decades Geno Auriemma had been the sun, and every player revolved around his glow, but Caitlin had become her own sun, and the orbit had changed forever. And so he kept talking, interview after interview, podcast, her name never far from his lips, each time the same routine, a little praise, a little dig, a compliment wrapped in doubt. But the more he talked, the clearer it became. Caitlin Clark wasn't just rewriting the record books, she was living in his head. She wasn't thinking about him, but he couldn't stop thinking about her, and that was the final humiliation, the realization that she had taken everything from him without even trying. By then it wasn't about basketball anymore, it was about power, about identity, about who owned the future. Geno had spent decades believing he was indispensable, and now the world was showing him he wasn't. He had tried to ignore her, then tried to belittle her, then tried to discredit her fans, and none of it worked. She just kept winning, kept rising, kept turning the world toward her and away from him, his influence shrinking by the day while her empire grew. Every time she stepped on the court it felt like more than a game, it felt like a trial, and with every shot she delivered the verdict: guilty of underestimating her, guilty of disrespecting her, guilty of doubting her, and the sentence was irrelevance because by the end of that season there was no debate left. She wasn't just good, she wasn't just living up to the hype, she had obliterated it, she had taken expectations and turned them into history, and Geno had watched helpless from the sidelines as the sport he once ruled crowned a new queen, and she never said his name, not once. That was the beauty of it, the quiet, the calm, the way her revenge came without drama, no screaming, no arguing, no speeches, just results that were impossible to deny. And as the world celebrated her rise, Geno's words aged like milk in the sun, bitter sour, embarrassing, his legacy of control dissolving as hers of freedom and fire took its place. This wasn't just a rivalry anymore, it was a transfer of power, and Geno knew it even if he would never admit it. Power never fades with a bang, it fades with a whisper. Geno had spent months trying to claw back control from Caitlin Clark. He tried silence, he tried arrogance, he tried insults, he tried framing her rise as just another byproduct of his dynasty, but nothing worked. She kept climbing, he kept sinking, and then in the shadows he tried something new. Money behind the cameras, away from the interviews, Geno was quietly investing in a brand new project, a shiny new 3-on-3 women's league called Unrivaled, backed by stars like Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. It had ambition, it had funding, but it was missing one thing: a face, and Geno knew only one player could give it instant legitimacy, only one name could drag in millions of fans, sponsors, and networks, only one athlete had the gravity to turn Unrivaled from a dream into a threat to the WNBA: Caitlin Clark. And so the same man who once wouldn't pick up the phone when she was a teenager now came knocking with it. Checkbook reports confirmed the league offered Caitlin over $1 million for an 8-week season, one of the richest contracts ever dangled in women's basketball. Think about that. The coach who once dismissed her as irrelevant was now begging for her to rescue his new empire. The man who told the world her hype wasn't real was now trying to monetize it. The man who called her fans delusional now needed those same fans to stream his games and buy his tickets. It was the purest form of desperation, and everyone could see it, but Caitlin wasn't fooled when that contract slid across her desk. She didn't see opportunity, she saw a trap, she saw a test, a desperate power grab from the very man who spent years trying to shrink her. She remembered the silence when she was a recruit, the dismissive comments, the mocking interviews, the way he called her supporters clueless and harmful to the game. She remembered how he had laughed at the idea she could be MVP and how she had proved him wrong. And now he wanted her to save him. Her answer was swift and cold: no noses, no shade, no press tour, just a single word that carried more weight than all of his decades of interviews combined. She didn't need his money, she didn't need his league, she didn't need his approval. The man who once brushed her aside was now asking for help, and she turned him down with the kind of grace that cuts deeper than any insult, and that one word ended him. Because without Caitlin, the Unrivaled league lost its soul, its centerpiece. It sparked the $1 million offer that was supposed to show strength became a confession of weakness. The project needed her more than she would ever need it, and when she walked away the hype collapsed before it even started. Sponsors hesitated, broadcasters cooled off, fans mocked it online, laughing at the idea that Geno thought she would ever play for him after everything he had said. The chess match he thought he was orchestrating ended in a single move, and she didn't even break a sweat. She didn't rant, she didn't drag him, she didn't even say his name. She just walked away, and that silence hurt more than any words could. Because here is the truth: Geno's era is over. For decades he and the old guard decided who mattered in women's basketball. They controlled the pipelines, the narratives, the opportunities. If you wanted to be great you had to go through them, but Caitlin shattered that system. She didn't need his banners to validate her, she didn't need his throne to shine. She built her empire from scratch with nothing but belief and brilliance, and when she rejected his $1 million offer she sent a message that echoed across the entire sport: the future belongs to the players, not the gatekeepers. That was the part that cut the deepest. His greatest mistake wasn't ignoring her as a recruit, his greatest mistake was believing the sport couldn't grow without him. He was indispensable. She proved he was irrelevant, and the humiliation didn't just belong to him, it was a warning to every coach, every executive, every power broker still clinging to the illusion of control. Caitlin's rejection wasn't just personal, it was cultural. It marked the line where the old world ended and the new one began. She showed an entire generation of athletes they don't need permission, they don't need approval, they don't need validation from the old kings to lead. They have the fans, the numbers, and the power to chart their own path, and she proved it with the simplest weapon of all: a single no. Maybe revenge isn't best served cold, maybe the sweetest revenge is served Silent, a calm final word that shows just how desperate your enemy has become. Caitlin Clark didn't just reject a contract, she rejected his system, his authority, his entire worldview, and in doing so she didn't just win, she ended his reign. She didn't take the throne, she burned it down.